Quite frankly, boys, I'm extremely offended by your actions. This episode is Butchered. You're in the Playhouse. Welcome to the Playhouse. I'm Uncle Paul, and it's time for our very special hellos. Hello to Borny, Joe Mayo, Matthew Street, Dave Sundstrom, the Sticker Mania family, Jennifer, Barbara, Jerome Luby, Beetle Brad, Perry Masters, Bungalow Ron, Peyton, Mark Moose, and Elena. Now, if you'd like a special hello, you can dedicate one to your pet even, or a special loved one, just leave it in the comments below, and we'll say hello in a future episode. But that's our very special hellos for today. Well, our Remco dolls seem to have gone astray. Now, in March of 1966, Robert Whittaker, famous photographer, and had many Beatle photo sessions, was hired again to take some photos of the boys because, now, I know a lot of Playhouse members may know this, but we have to be educational and informative here on the Playhouse. Now, in America, the Beatles had more albums than they actually recorded than in the United Kingdom, because Capitol Records had the ability in their contract to just put 12 songs on their albums. Now, the Beatles' original albums were generally recorded at 14 songs. And they didn't like to include their singles on the albums because the Beatles always wanted their fans and buyers to get the most optimum for their money. So there was always leftover songs, especially during this 1965-66 period, as the original soundtrack album to the Beatles' 1965 film Help has 14 songs on it. But in America, Capitol Records released the Help soundtrack with the incidental instrumental music, making the Help album having only about 4 or 5 new Beatles songs on it. So between the releases of Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver, that left Capitol Records with a lot of extra tracks. And that includes Beatles for Sale, to be honest with you. Just that songs were mounting up in the Capitol vaults. So the Capitol created a standalone, really non-sanctioned Beatles album. Yes, called The Beatles Yesterday and Today. And we have a nice example of what is mainly known as The Beatles Yesterday and Today, holding up having a combination of the massively popular Yesterday single, and I believe that's why this album was named cleverly Yesterday and Today, even though there's no Beatles song called Today. We could put Here Today on it now if there was a compilation, Paul McCartney's solo song. But, and by the way, we know that Yesterday was not intended even to be a single. In the United Kingdom originally, it wasn't. They were very proud of it, but it certainly was out of the normal standard of a Beatle record, having just Paul McCartney pretty much sing by himself with the orchestration that George Martin did so beautifully. So on the Beatles Yesterday and Today Capitol Records album, that was only, again, made or thought of for the American audiences, it's a combination of Yesterday, Dr. Robert, I'm Only Sleeping, and Your Bird Can Sing, We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper, Massive Hits, Nowhere Man, What Goes On, Drive My Car, If I Needed Someone, Act Naturally. That's all I needed was 12 songs to create a whole new Beatles album that the Beatles never sanctioned or really wanted released, especially when they were doing such wonderful avant-garde album covers at the time. We know certainly Rubber Soul and Revolver was beginning that period of them really caring what they always did, though, starting with Meet the Beatles, of course, the wonderful portraits, but what the album cover was going to look like. So Capitol made a request that they were putting this out. It was totally illegal in their contract that Capitol Records had, but the Beatles really never cared for it. So, hence, Robert Whittaker, they all got together for a nice photo session. Now, at this point, the Beatles were very experimental. Now, Robert Whittaker, this took place in March of 1966. Was very avant-garde himself, and he brought props along to the photo session. So for many people think that this was really the Beatles' idea, it wasn't. Robert Whittaker brought the dolls and the Beatles just always just showed up. And he brought other props as well. There's pictures, I don't think we have an example, but he also brought like a bunch of nails, and there's famous photos of like John nailing and putting a nail in another Beatles head. So they were just having fun with it. So they got very much into this portrait, and folklore says that there was a concept to this idea. And the concept, it was either, now this was after the 1966, this was a rough year for the Beatles, to be honest with you, in America. Because we had the famous John Lennon, we'll just say it real fast, whether people know it or not, but the Jesus remark. They were touring, they gave up touring in August of 66, really due to that. And of course, there are difficult times overseas as well that they've openly talked about in the Beatles anthology. So it may be, again, this is all speculation. I'm not saying that this is all fact. But one of the things of the thoughts behind this particular photo session was that the Beatles then were to look at as a band of flesh and blood. And again, this is following the Jesus remark, rather than gods. All right, if you look at that interpretation, perhaps, but again, when it comes to art, you have to look at that. And also, it was sometimes talked about as a protest against the Vietnam War. That also has come up. I don't think we factually know, and John was very bored with these photo sessions. So this made him very happy and excited that they were doing something rather avant-garde, as their music also turned that way. So again, in March of 1966, they had this wonderful photo session with the baby dolls and me, and for this Yesterday and Today album. By the way, well, we haven't said the official title yet, right? But it's not, I don't think also, according to folklore, yes, you could look at this album as the songs were being butchered, but I honestly don't believe, but that is one of the also things that come out relating to this photo session. So on June 14th, 1966, well, Yesterday and Today is released in America. And 750,000 copies made it to the shelves. Well, this is where our good friend also, Alan Livingston, comes in. Now, in our previous episode relating to Laurel and Hardy, where Alan Livingston is the creator of Bozo the Clown. He was an executive at Capitol Records in the 1940s, and he created Bozo the Clown, and then later, entrepreneur Larry Harmon bought the rights to Bozo the Clown and Laurel and Hardy cartoons. Now, Alan Livingston at this point is the president of Capitol Records. So he's been with Capitol Records for decades, from just creating Bozo the Clown as just an art executive, I suppose. And now again, he's the president. And it's 1966. And his lads from Liverpool have given him a new photo for the totally completed, just by Capitol, Yesterday and Today album. And Alan hated it. And this, I don't think this is folklore. He knew it immediately. This is horrible. But it was somewhere in the fine print of the contract that they had to put out what the Beatles requested. And folklore also says, I don't think George Martin was that thrilled with it, but John was really enthused. And John really fought. Also, no, you're not going to change it. This is the cover for this Yesterday and Today album. He didn't think very much of it. There is an interview that John did, I think maybe in late 1970s, or probably sadly in one of the last interviews in 1980, where he talks about the butcher cover and he couldn't comprehend why it was such a fuss. And that's just was his thinking. And really, when we look at it in today's times, even back in 1980, yeah, right, it's what it is. It's art. At least that's what the Playhouse thinks. But certainly, we were joking about, see, Capitol Records, all Capitol Records had to be Bozo approved by Alan Livingston. Well, this Capitol record was certainly not Bozo approved. So it went out on the shelf, again, on June 14th, 1966, with 750,000 copies being pressed. And, within days, everyone was offended. Oh my God. Or Beatles, what are they doing with the dolls and the meat in butcher smocks? So the album was recalled. And what the retailers, the record retailers, had to do was they were instructed to ship the record back. The Capitol Records had an idea. They were not going to lose the sleeves. So here's the letter. We have another alternate shot. See, we're going to talk about, these are alternate shots that were taken that day. Very similar. See, they were taking nice, see how bored everyone looks compared to, look how happy they are with the butcher smokes and dolls. And Paul has to pose in the trunk, and of course, this was the photo that was used. This is switched around, though. But we certainly have enough. We'll get to the capital letter in a second. We certainly have enough alternate pictures. In fact, here, we might as well talk about this now. Here are some alternate shots that were taken, you can tell, in the same clothing from the photo session with world-renowned photographer Robert Whitaker. There's Paul McCartney sitting there. They got their Pepsi in the bottles right here. I love it. And the caps are sitting on the table. Paul just talking during the photo session. This is a wonderful candid shot of John in the trunk. One of the times that John looks happy while he was in the trunk. Another alternate reverse shot. So those are some of the alternates. So you could tell again, when they were getting around to the fun stuff with the nails and the baby butcher covers, well, they were having a lot of fun. So back to the recall. So this is the copy of the letter that Capitol Records sent out asking. And it says here, it's dated again June 1466. So it must have been really fast. Oh, because this is the letter regarding a promotional copy even. But all records were asked to be sent back. Dear reviewer, in the past few days, you may have received an advanced promotional copy of the Beatles' new album, The Beatles, Yesterday and Today. In accordance with the following statement from Alan Livingston, president of Capitol Records, the original album cover is being discarded and a new jacket is being prepared. Now here's his quote. The original cover, created in England, was intended as pop art, satire. However, a sampling of public opinion in the United States indicates that the cover design is subject to misinterpretation. For this reason, and to avoid any possible controversy on underserved harm to the Beatles' image or reputation, Capitol has chosen to withdraw the LP and substitute a more generally acceptable design. All consumer copies of the Beatles album will be packaged in a new cover, which will be available within the next week to 10 days. As soon as they are, we will forward you a copy. In the meantime, we would appreciate if you disregard the promotional album and, if all possible, return it COD to Capitol Records in their headquarters in Hollywood, California. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. Good old manager of Press and Information Services, Ron Tepper. Well, I don't know how many people really brought the album back. There are a lot of butcher covers, which is now what the album is known, and I knew everyone was yelling that, Playhouse viewers, what it is known. Now, but their idea was, because they didn't want to lose the cardboard to repackage the album, instead of just destroying them, we're going to take this new photo of the Beatles and we're going to paste it over the ones that we got or the ones that we didn't go out. Well, then they really just created a great collector's item. So we're going to talk about the 3 ways that you could still track down what we call a Beatles butcher cover. All right, there are 3 states, as we call it. All right, now, a first state copy is an original. This is a very nice example. Of course, it's in the extra plastic, but this is sealed. Let's an original, this is first state. This is an example. The first state, and again, also to collectors, it matters if it's stereo or mono or east or west, because actually on the West Coast, they used different type of glue. But we're going to get to that also in a moment. This is all for you, Frank, in Kentucky. This is a first state. If you would find yesterday and today, and it's still, there's no paste over, and it's still shrunk, the shrink wrap is still on it, that it's still sealed. Okay, so that's an example. We're not saying that this is an original butcher cover. It's an example of what a first state Beatles butcher cover would look like and is available. Now, a second state would have the trunk pasted over. Now, this is just another version variation of it. This is a fun, because this has been bootleg many times. This is just fun. This is a nice green vinyl copy of Yesterday and Today. So a second state is when you have this picture, which was the replacement, over the butcher cover. So that's second state, non-peeled. By the way, very collectible, because they use thin paper. Everyone, when you're out there and you know if you find Yesterday and Today and it's original pressing, and you wonder if there's a butcher cover underneath this cover, Ringo's head from this session is seen over the white portion of the photograph. So then it bleeds through. So then you can easily start to tell, oh my goodness, there's what they call a butcher cover underneath on the second state. Now a third state is if someone has this over the butcher cover and they peel it. And there are many examples of then people trying to peel off the original cover in order to obtain this cover. And yes, my good friend Frank, Mr. Sigurmania, Kentucky, has been doing this for like 40 or 50 years, peeling them. Now, of course, it's all according to preference, whether you want something not peeled or something peeled, or again, in its original state. But those are the three states of butcher cover collecting in a Cliff Notes version here of the Beatles butcher cover, which again, we have tried to do for you. This is fun. This is a French EP, which used the alternate photo session as well of Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. We wanted to show you that. And we have various alternate photos that were taken during the session as well. See, this is a lot of fun. See, everyone also thinks, since you're so used to just seeing the main butcher cover photo, that there were other photos taken that day. Look at Paul with his eyes closed. And George, actually, they all have their eyes closed. See, I just noticed that here while we're recording the Playhouse. That's pretty neat. Actually, I almost would have used this one. To me, this was actually more creepier, and the dolls are not in it. This is a great shot, by the way, which I'm actually admiring for the first time as we do this. That really is unique. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed our exploration a little bit into the Beatles butcher cover. It's a great item to still find 50 plus years later. And they are obviously highly collected in the Beatles world. And it just is another little asterisk of what makes the Beatles so important, but also fun to collect and have left their mark on history. And that's what makes it so much fun. Well, please subscribe, comment, like, and share to the Playhouse. But for now, the Playhouse is closed. Thanks, Joe Friday.
Oh, why don't somebody get me Dan Thorne? He's the only man can handle this. I'm trying to get him.